Okay. All right. With that being said, we'll move on to our next quick fire. Let's hit some of the week's most reckless headlines, the ones you won't hear at your HR-approved morning meetings. Chad bans Americans from Chad. Petty levels after Donald Trump banned over 40 countries, including Chadians. The Chad president, Mahamat Deby, just looked at the US and said, as you no gree for us, we no go gree for you. Tit for tat, African dads will be proud. Now, we all know what's going on with Donald Trump and, him being trigger happy about certain things. Of course, it started with the tax that he levied on different countries across the world. Now, he's brought out a list of countries where he's giving travel ban, including Chad. Now, the president of Chad has retaliated by saying, if you're going to ban us, we can as well ban you. Do you think that's justified? Let me ask you first.
Yeah, absolutely, it's justified. I mean, no one has the monopoly to all this form of decisions. If Americans are saying don't come to us, we can always also say don't come to us too.
Yeah.
And Trump has every right to make the decisions that he has made.
Being the first man of the
so
country.
I really don't see anything wrong with that. I'm sure he has his reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's making the best decision for America,
country,
not the entire world. So, hey, it's fine.
It's interesting because, gang, I need to ask you this: do you think there's some form of abuse of power? Because earlier in the week, someone and I were having this conversation, and the person was like, you know what, since Donald Trump wants to play things like this, you know what, we, the rest of the world, we don't want to trade in dollars anymore. Let's trade in another currency and let's see how it plays out. Do you think that's the solution?
Well, that isn't the solution. It's a two wrongs right situation. For me, I would have loved, this is just me because, the way my mind works. I would love to see certain countries take steps and decisions like this before America takes their own decisions. Because it's like a spill-off. It's like America runs the world. When they now say your country is this, that's when you now decide to. It would have been lovely to hear a country come out first before Donald Trump talked about his taxes on certain things to China and whatnot. It would have been great for China to come out first and say, this is what we think about America or Trump's regime, and say this is what we think before America retaliates. Now everybody's retaliating to America. That means America still comes first. America is still being seen as the superpower. How many Americans or how much of America is actually involved in Chad as a whole?
Yeah.
Do you understand? So I will say, how effective is this ban? Like if Americans wanted to come, you won't let them in. If people brought dollars to your country, you won't accept.
But are Americans the biggest manufacturers of anything?
No, but here's the funny thing. They're the biggest hype men in the world.
Okay.
Do you understand? Because they control stuff.
Absolutely.
You get where I'm coming from? It's just like even here in Nigeria now, if we say, there's no way if I go to Nigeria, how they tell you that if you don't see an Igbo person there, leave that place.
Yeah.
Do you understand? You expect to have their presence everywhere because of who they are.
Okay.
So they're a world power, no doubt.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, they're a world power, no doubt.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the fact that people wait for them to make these decisions before they attack them. We've been speaking about the dollar in general when it comes to exchange rates, how we do our business internationally.
And last week we still talked about the fact that visa fees should be returned to people
Exactly.
when they granted visas.
We've been talking about even currencies in Africa, West Africa or an African currency, things that help the market better. But of course, the powers that be don't let these kind of things happen, or it will take time before these kind of things actually do exist. So the almighty dollar is there internationally, used in all sorts of trade. And before you can even initiate something like, let's no longer invest in the dollar, that'll be a whole different story entirely that we won't see in our lifetime.
Can we afford not to, demand the dollar?
No, we can't.
We can't. We can?
No, we cannot.
Yeah, that's
in our lifetime, we can't because
Why can't we?
in our lifetime,
Yeah, why can't we?
it's because of
Like, who makes the
everything
rules?
is tied
If I
around-
say I don't want to trade in dollars anymore. So the thing is this, remember Brexit? Remember when the euro came up? You see, I feel in this part of the world, generally, we've allowed the Western world dictate how our economy should be run.
Exactly.
We've allowed the Western world dictate what we import and the cost and the price, and we've allowed them control what we do. If every African country says today, you know what, yeah, we like you, but in the next 10 years, this is what we want to do with our economy, this is what we want to do as a nation or as a continent, things would change.
No doubt that would change. But the problem is, look at our leaders. Is that what our leaders are really striving to get? You get me? If you're looking at a country that's based on crude oil and exportations here and there, it's all done in dollars.
Absolutely.
So the funny thing is, are you going to close down your country completely before you exchange in all of these imports and exports?
But I'm saying, why in dollars?
Because that's
what the
generally
business world
accepted.
has generally accepted.
I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was a standard set at a particular time because it was working. But now that multiple tariffs have been tossed around to different countries, multiple countries also have a right to refuse and say, this is how we want to do business.
Let me give you an example. I was about to say something I shouldn't have said.
Okay.
I don't mean this the way I'm saying it, but let me just say it. As useless as the Naira is, do you think other African countries want to trade in Naira?
That's a lovely question.
So in Africa itself, if you look at the currencies in Africa, do you remember where Ghanaian cedis were compared to Naira? Look at what has happened now.
Yeah.
Rand itself compared to Naira, look at where it is now. If Africans decide which one of these currencies should we adopt, that will become another story.
Yeah.
Everybody will be like, why am I? Naira is a Nigerian thing. If we adopt the Naira, then other African countries will be influenced by the Naira. And we know about Nigeria's embezzlement and the way corruption has eaten deep into this country. If you say you want to use Rand, that's another currency itself. So we don't even have that camaraderie between ourselves as African countries to come out and say, let's create a certain currency. Even ECOWAS is struggling to say, let's have a unified currency for the West African region.
Yeah.
Let's have a unified
currency.
That's
been on for many years now.
For as long as I can remember.
I think it's a demand situation, really. Because
so everybody also, should be told, we look to our colonizers, we look to the Western world as superior.
So some will say, somehow we're still colonized because we have still been dictated to.
Remember last week, the other guy that was saying that Africa needs to be recolonized.
Oh, yeah.
So the problem is the way we see things. And we are not as independent as we actually should be. We are still dependent on certain things. I've said this on the Nigerian front so many times. I can't imagine that since 1960 till now, how hard is it to have a refinery?
Absolutely, it's ridiculous.
Or have one, or two, or three, or four, or five. How hard is it to refine your own natural resource? That you have to extract it, export it, and get back the finished product, and import back the finished product. So where we are, I don't know whether we're going backwards or forwards. So there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that we don't know of. And hopefully if we ever get into those positions, we might be able to.
But even we as a people, do we demand our own products? Do we demand them realistically?
Well, we demand them, but the truth be told, some of our products are, in terms of quality, might not be as strong, do you understand, as other things. And it's always like, you know how you always feel your neighbor is doing better than you, but you never really know till you go to your neighbor's house.
I mean, which answers why the dollar is being demanded.
Yeah, but I feel that if we really take a deep dive and look at all of these things, you mentioned the fact that we have, our products are a bit, they're not up there when it comes to standard.
Substandard.
I think that's where the government needs to help people, and of course the finance sector.
But like I told you, the government now, to an extent, is a stooge to other higher governments.
The thing is this: I feel education-wise, we don't prioritize that, and it's very important because if you go to countries like China, they've prioritized education up to the sense that they know that that is the future. They're building technology, they're advanced, and they know that knowledge is key. And
when you look at the Asian market, that you mentioned China now, China are not as dependent as African nations are.
Exactly.
We are also dependent on the Chinese.
Time, they were dependent. And they got to a point, they stopped, they recalibrated, and they were like, this is what we want to do with our nation. And look at where they are today.
What comes first, really? Is it the capacity of the youth to produce these things, or the enabling environment?
For me, I think it's identifying what the problem is and looking for a solution.
Our people, are they creative enough?
Yes, they are.
Because you see, even in situations where we do not have funds to get things done, people who are really creative would look for ways to get it done.
Yeah.
You know, we are not creating iPhones. We are not making, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
But it's still a failure of what the system is offering.
But it's hunger and poverty.
Yeah.
If you go to my state, there was a time the mineral resource tantalite was a big deal. It's also known as the Tin City as well. There are a lot of mineral resources that are there that people are mining locally. They are mining locally. Lives have been lost in mining some of these minerals. Certain things that you dig into, tunnels you dig into, collapse on people and it becomes your burial ground. So people rush to get those things just to make money, to live a certain kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I think it's the hunger and poverty and situation in the country. If people were not that hungry or that poor, that they become desperate, they'll be able to focus on other things in life that can be used to advance and develop certain people. When you don't belly full, you get where I'm coming from? Then you'll not be stressing yourself on. Then you can sit down and be like, oh, how do I make a table better than this? But you haven't even eaten yet, you're thinking about a table. So as long as there's hunger and poverty in the land, it's hard to actually get people to think outside the box.
But adversity is what, you know, makes great men.
Because people live day to day.